When a person disappears, they are not just gone, but that person's loved ones and those who depend on them are left behind. What do you think happens when an entire village disappears? Hiya! Hope everyone's muscles are feeling limber and strong. Or if they're sore from a good workout. If not, try doing a couple stretches. Your body will thank you, as will I. Thank you for taking care of yourself. Now that we're loosened up, let's get to making a monster. This week, we have a more bestial creature, something that fits closer to a more traditional definition of monster than what we've been making these past few weeks. Actually, I have an idea for this. I've seen a bunch of sheep shearing videos show up in my feed, and I think we can go in that sort of direction for today's monster. But before we start skipping steps, let's start off as we usually do, by selecting 4 cards to serve as visual inspiration for the monster. Then we'll hit on lore, and after that we can wrap up by filling out a monster card so you all can use this strange creature at your game tables. With that, let's go straight on to the lore. When a domesticated creature is left to the wild, what do you think happens? The answer is nothing good. Unfortunately, that's what happened here. This is a beast bred to be in service to and taken care of by a shepherd. It's even worse when it's a lone runt taken in as a pet. Let's break this monster down and paint a picture through its body. Starting with the skin, we can see that it's not furry, more smooth and blubbery, likely adapted to be in the water, though the other limbs are not that well adapted to swimming in the water. Instead, it's likely to live on the coast. With those gigantic pupils to take in a lot of light, it's also likely to be nocturnal or cave-dwelling. Let's say that it lives in rocky coastal caves. It likely works similar to a seal or sea lion, some of the more intelligent waterbound creatures. For weeks after the shepherd's disappearance, cries of confusion could be heard all along the coast. The ribs are visible. This poor thing is hungry. What and how does it eat? Well, those tentacles on the front don't seem to have much strength, at least compared to those powerful front arms. Maybe they're feelers, something to dip into and investigate complex structures like coral. That makes sense, but why the hands? Well, otters, for example, have hand-like appendages they use to grab and crush mollusks and shellfish. This creature could do the same. But it never learned how to find the areas with plentiful shellfish. The shepherd always kept the feeding pool filled, and even put the best bits in little maze boxes for fun. Desperate for food, this creature eats whatever they can, even if it makes them sick. That leads us to the last notable part of the body, the one that your eyes have likely been drawn to since the start. The gigantic crystalline spikes growing out of its back, and the dark patch they grow out of. Unfortunately, this is the part most directly inspired by the unshorn sheep. These crystals, much like fleece, naturally grew out of this creature before it was domesticated. In the wild, those crystals were a defense mechanism. Small, shiny rocks that could be charged with magic before they were dropped off the creature's back, activating a strong light spell. This sudden bright light would ward off and distract predators, allowing this creature to escape. That ability to store and channel magic is extremely valuable for a society with any sort of sorcery. Those little crystals would be fantastic for wands, and maybe some larger ones could be affixed to staves. That led a coastal village to farm these creatures as livestock. Over time, these creatures would be bred for their size and speed of crystal growth. Skittish as these small monsters were, they would drop the crystals whenever disturbed, and that would lead to smaller overall crystal sizes. Eventually, with their masters serving as guardians, the livestock found that they needed to drop the crystals less and less often, until it became difficult for them to drop the crystals without help. Then, of course, one of the runts from the main flock was adopted by the shepherd as a pet. Separate from the rest of its species, it was visited daily and taught how to do tricks. Only a few months after the masters, the shepherd, and all of the others of its species disappeared, bright lights and a staticky magical charge filled the night as they tried to ram and scrape the crystals off. Those bright flashes were all that kept predators from pursuing the smell of blood. And unfortunately, that's where we come to today. This abandoned runts crystals have been growing for years upon years. Unable to drop naturally, they've grown too big, pulling on this creature's back and tearing open its skin. The ramming and scraping worked for some of the crystals, but there are still too many, and they've ingrown, essentially becoming infections. This creature is wheezing with anxiety and pain. It misses its shepherd and all the treats they got for doing tricks. But what hurts most of all is its back. It can feel with every step, jostle, and even heartbeat the crystals that still grow longer and longer. Why can't someone help it? It notices slow movement, something walking up to it. It fails to stand. It can only reach out to whatever is coming and whimper. Could that be a new shepherd to help them? Or maybe it's there to kill and eat it. Whatever happens, let it happen. Let this pain stop. Well, what will your players do? That is the question. For now, hug your pets and never let them go. Let's move on to the monster card. For the name, I think abandoned livestock is good. Well, maybe it can be dressed up just a little. How about it instead we say abandoned stray? Next, we have the abilities. Let's focus on what the stray can do when it's healthy. We can start off with the fact that it's good at breaking through shellfish's hard exteriors. Let's call this ability Shell Cracker. Then we can go off its skin and how that can serve as protection from both attacks and the cold. We'll call it Blubbery Armor. Finally, we will get to the crystals. I'm not sure how to represent the complex situation of them being magical, being able to drop off at one time but not anymore, and then the infection situation. At the very least, we can get across the main points of the creature's story. Unshorn, overgrown, and painful crystals. Let's add one more note that we'll put it in brackets to denote that it's a special condition. Neglected. All right, that should do for the abilities. The stats. As usual, we're going with the classic D&D 5th edition stat spread. I'll say the numbers for when the stray is healthy, but I'll also note the neglected stats on the card. Strength. Normally it would be a 3, but for now, let's put it at a 1. Dexterity. Normally a 2, now same, 1. Constitution. Normally a 4, now a 0. Intelligence. This is a little difficult. We'll put it at a 0 for now, but the stray is a very intelligent creature, on the level of dogs and maybe even something close to monkeys or octopi, especially since it can cast a delayed light spell. Normally a 1 or a 2. Wisdom. This is normally a -1, not very wise to the world because the stray was so sheltered, but now it's even less aware of the situation because of the pain. -2. I think for charisma, this is the stat that will stay the same. The stray will now use it to ask for help, look pathetic, and communicate its pain instead of trying to make friends and beg for treats. Now for the core phrases. These are short phrases used to help guide GMs on how this creature will act. I think, though, that I wanted to use something to help delineate the change in how the stray acts from being neglected. I'll cross out the original phrase and replace it with the current version in brackets. As players heal and help the stray, the phrases will restore themselves to normal. Beg for treats. Beg for help. Good boy for the shepherd. Where is the shepherd? Learn tricks for treats. The crystals hurt. One last detail that I couldn't really fit anywhere else, but the crystals can be a nice treasure to offer your players. Though it'll be important to handle it in a way that doesn't make the players get too greedy and just hurt this thing. And that's that. This turned out much more dour than I originally thought when drawing this creature. Still, that's how the process goes sometimes. No matter what comes out of this, these monsters are for you. Take from them what you will. They're meant to elicit a vibe and spark adventures. Maybe this one will be a sad story at your table about taking care of the stray, nursing it back to health, and figuring out what happened to the shepherd. And if you want to help the real-life version of this story, go volunteer at your local animal shelter. There are plenty of dogs and cats that are abandoned and they don't know why. Even something as simple as sending them your old and clean towels and sheets can help a lot. Finally, it feels weird to say this after all that narrative. But if you want to see more monsters like this, but much happier and sillier, please like and subscribe. I'll be here every week making new monsters for y'all. I'll make sure to link my silliest episode in the end card as a palate cleanser so you guys can get on with your day. With that, let's bring this video to a close. For those of you with dark skies, good night. And if you have bright days, good morning. Whatever part of the world you're from, I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Goodbye!